Throughout the years, humanity has evolved, adapted and grown to understand the universe around them, and with this, have in turn created technologies to aid them in their pursuit of knowledge. Deep underground in the Aperture Science Laboratories complex, the scientists worked hard to create and distribute the best inventions they could come up with. In their race to beat their competitors in being the leading science company in the world, they developed something that could effectively achieve this goal, but at a great cost. What was this machine? How did it affect the running of Aperture Science? And did it really lie about cake? Here we explore in the lore and story behind GLaDOS. Way back during the 1950s, Aperture Science boomed with success. The CEO, Cave Johnson, had revolutionized the industry to the point where his products required a large, dedicated space to be tested, the Aperture Science Enrichment Center. With over 1,000 tests performed every day, Cave could not oversee every one, and so he recorded instructions to be played to the test subjects upon their arrival. Even with this adaptation to the operation of the facility, Cave struggled to complete his workload efficiently with the time he had, and with this, he decided to hire an assistant to help. Young, bright and motivated, Carolyn impressed Cave straight away with her dedication to science. She showed a similar determination to the outcome of the experiments as he did, and from this, they quickly developed a close working relationship. Her passion for science even led Cave to remark that she was married to it. As Cave recorded his messages for the test participants, he even made the effort to include her in them, and soon enough, she became the backbone of the facility in helping it function. With Aperture's goal to contribute to science, this sometimes led to fatalities due to the dangerous and unstable equipment being used. Regardless of this, Carolyn supported the eccentric decisions Cave had to make. Cave saw great potential in his assistant, and although she had such a bright mind, he noticed that she often played down her own abilities to uplift his. It appeared Carolyn, although fully supportive of Cave's ambition for the future of his company, had empathy for the test subjects within the facility. But for the future of science, sacrifices had to be made. More often than not, this meant the mutilation or even death of the test subjects. As the disappearance of these test subjects piled up over the years, Cave and Aperture would soon have to answer for their misdeeds. Moving into the 1960s, Carolyn stayed by Cave's side as Aperture entered its tumultuous years. The products that the company had sent out into the world were now being pulled from the shelves for violating health and safety regulations. Following this, the many products still in development also fell into a state of constant testing, leaving very few approved products sent out into the world. A combination of these factors would lead to a huge drop in the company's income. In an attempt to protect Aperture from those who would seek to further shut it down, Cave decided to seal off the lower areas of Test Shaft 09, a place where the most unethical experiments had been performed. But this would not be enough to stop the fall of the company. In 1968, Cave was called into question by the US Senate due to the missing test subjects that had entered the facility and never left. This once successful science company that had previously pushed forward onto the next frontier had fallen so far. Due to this domino effect, Cave finally declared bankruptcy for Aperture in the same year, and with this, Cave's positive, energetic, and can-do attitude finally broke. Watching his world fall around him, Carolyn became Cave's closest confidant. She cared deeply for this man and admired his great mind, and so she would help him in any way she could, for the years to come. This place and cave were not just her job, they were her life. By the 1980s, Aperture had fallen even further. Cave had searched over the years for that one thing that could bring Aperture back to its former glory. To this, he discovered that moon rocks had the incredible ability, when converted, to act as a perfect portal conductor, as well as various other conversion gels. And with this, he ordered $70 million worth of moon rock. In desperation, Cave personally oversaw the conversion of the moon rocks into these gels, but over time, his constant exposure to the rocks began to damage his kidneys and lungs, and soon, he developed moon rock poisoning. Over the following years, Cave's condition worsened drastically, where he became extremely ill. In an attempt to cheat death, in 1982, Cave ordered his scientists to research artificial intelligence technology in the hopes he could upload his mind and live on forever and run Aperture as a sentient machine. If humanity had discovered a way to store music on a compact disc, surely they could store a man's intelligence too. Aware that this technology may not be complete before his demise, he gave his employees 2 orders if he were to pass away. The first, that Carolyn take over as CEO of Aperture and run it, and the second, that Carolyn be uploaded to the artificial intelligence system, regardless of any objections she may have. With these parameters set, the genetic lifeform and the disk operating system, also known as GLaDOS, commenced. Over the next few years, Cave succumbed to his poisoning, leaving Carolyn to run the company. Under her leadership, Aperture survived, where the company took a keen interest in testing their portal technology. After much research and understanding, the technicians began construction on the disk operating part of GLaDOS in the Enrichment Center in 1986. They now had a potential system that could help them beat Black Mesa in perfecting portal technology. Now, all they needed to do was perfect the genetic lifeform part of the machine using many years of their research. Moving into the 1990s, the technicians successfully completed the GLaDOS project. All they had to do was upload Carolyn to it. Following Cave's final order, the scientists uploaded Carolyn to the GLaDOS system. It is unknown whether she willingly went through with this procedure or whether she was forced, but this process was successful. Now, Carolyn had become something new, the first of her kind. Although this groundbreaking technology had been successful, the aftermath of going through this traumatizing procedure meant that the Carolyn that everybody had known before the upload would not be the Carolyn they would meet in GLaDOS. If used correctly, GLaDOS could efficiently run the facility and fast-track the development of their technologies, something they would need to beat their rival company, Black Mesa. Activating GLaDOS for the first time, the scientists expected to be met by the kind Carolyn they had known, but they received the opposite. GLaDOS instead showed high levels of instability straight away, where she attempted to murder the scientists with each activation. She had seemingly forgotten who she was before activation, and now only wanted to murder those around her. Some believe this to have been a side effect of her traumatic upload of her consciousness against her will, while others believe she had simply lost access to her conscience. Keeping her offline, the team worked on GLaDOS and came up with the Red Phone Plan, a failsafe to be activated from within the AI chamber if GLaDOS became unstable and murderous upon her next activation. Moving forward, during Aperture's Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, GLaDOS was activated as a part of the scheduled events, but was shut down following an unknown incident. From this, scientists attempted to activate GLaDOS multiple times over the years, but each activation ended with the same result: the attempted murder of the occupants of the Aperture facility. Now in the 2000s, Aperture developed personality cores with their goal being to adjust the behavior and murderous tendencies of GLaDOS. As they went through many of these cores, they believed they had finally found the perfect combination. These cores consisted of the Curiosity Core, the Knowledge Core, the Anger Core, and most importantly, the Morality Core. While the first three cores allowed GLaDOS to control and better maintain her knowledge, emotions, and inquisitiveness, the Morality Core essentially gave her a conscience, but you can always ignore your conscience. Upon activation after receiving her new cores, GLaDOS awakened in a new state. She explained to the scientists that she had now lost all interest in killing, and now craved science. Although the technicians still did not recognize Carolyn within GLaDOS, her new state was a welcome sight compared to how she had acted in the past. With this love of science, it appeared that part of Carolyn's personality was showing through, and with her new positive attitude, the scientists decided to keep her online. On Aperture's Bring Your Cat to Work Day, GLaDOS told the scientists that she had found herself drawn to the study of consciousness and wanted to undertake an experiment with cats and boxes. But to conduct this experiment, she also needed a little neurotoxin. Believing GLaDOS to have fully changed since the addition of the Morality Core, the scientists supplied these materials to her, their reasoning being that it was for science. Now with the trust of the scientists and access to neurotoxin, GLaDOS locks down the entire facility in 2 picoseconds. With the scientists unable to escape, she activated the neurotoxin and it flooded the facility, killing many of the employees. Now in full control, GLaDOS could do anything she wanted, where she could monitor the entire facility through the many security cameras scattered around. No one would be safe. Aware of the rivalry between Aperture and Black Mesa, and with a love of science, GLaDOS forced the surviving scientists to test the Aperture Science handheld portal device in an attempt to beat Black Mesa in the race for portal technology. Aperture would later win this race after Black Mesa's destruction following a resonance cascade. Over the following weeks, one by one, the trapped scientists fell to the tests they had once observed. With her love of science, she continued to monitor and force their cooperation. For those who refused, she offered rewards, one being a Black Forest cake, something Aperture had once given as a reward to the willing participants who had completed their experiments. Only GLaDOS did not intend to follow through with her offer. As GLaDOS eventually ran out of Aperture employees, she moved on to her next phase of testing, the test subjects held within the relaxation vault. Now, she could begin the real tests. Aperture had fallen, but she could rebuild it to her liking for science. Awakening the first name on the testing roster, GLaDOS meets Chell. Having been unconscious during GLaDOS's murderous reign, Chell was unaware of what had happened in the facility around her. Restricted only to the testing chambers within the enrichment center, Chell follows the instructions of GLaDOS, simply willing to perform well as a test subject. Making her way through the chambers, GLaDOS manipulates and deliberately leaves out important information needed to survive specific tests in the hope that Chell would either die or figure out the test chambers herself, using system errors to explain away any issues. As Chell makes it to the final test chamber on this track, GLaDOS asks her to stay on the moving platform moving towards the incinerator, still pretending to be an automated voice system. Acting against these instructions, Chell portals herself from the moving platform to safety. Here, GLaDOS makes an effort to convince Chell that the attempt to kill her was a part of the test. However, in doing so, she had alerted Chell that she had been sentient the whole time, and these mishaps with communication had been intentional. Escaping into the background of the facility, GLaDOS uses the speaker system to try and convince Chell to come back out into view of her security cameras and offers her cake, survival, and even a place to live out her days in Aperture in return for her compliance. While her manipulative tactics had worked in the past, Chell sees through these and ignores each one. To this, GLaDOS places sentry turrets in the hope they would stop the rogue test subject. Frustrated with Chell's disobedience, GLaDOS becomes extremely passive-aggressive, making morbid and dark comments about her past and current situation in an attempt to get inside of her head. While clearly angry, her tone remained calm and calculated, without emotion. Having worked her way through to GLaDOS's chamber, Chell finally meets GLaDOS in all her glory. In a brief altercation, GLaDOS detaches her morality core and attempts to use reverse psychology to convince Chell to destroy it. To her luck, Chell bites and drops the core into an incinerator, removing its ability to control GLaDOS's moral decisions. Now, the robot could have full access to her neurotoxin again. With this, GLaDOS begins to flood the chamber with neurotoxin as Chell continues to remove her cores. For each core removed, GLaDOS becomes angrier and angrier, each removing a part of her ability to function. With this anger, she continues to hurl insults at Chell. Although the cores had limited her to a degree, they also served the function to stabilize a reactor core above GLaDOS. Due to the destruction of these cores, this reactor explodes and summons a portal on the ceiling, where it pulls both Chell and GLaDOS through into the car park of Aperture. Although Chell had escaped the facility, she was knocked unconscious during this explosion. To this, a party escort bot of the facility pulls her back inside and places her inside of a relaxation vault, ready to be tested again when the time came. Even though the reactor core had exploded, GLaDOS's backup system came into effect shortly after, restoring the many personality cores across the facility where they would maintain the functioning and upkeep of Aperture. With this system, GLaDOS's consciousness would then endlessly loop her last 2 minutes of memory until being reactivated, reliving her destruction over and over again for the foreseeable future. Many years later, some say 15, while others believe this to have been 50,000, GLaDOS's cores maintained Aperture. During this time, GLaDOS had been trapped in her endless 2-minute loop of destruction, and then she wasn't. She was awake again. Pulling herself up, GLaDOS observes her surroundings and then sees Chell, her murderer. Chell had been woken by one of the personality cores, Wheatley. He had promised to get her out of the facility, but they had accidentally activated GLaDOS in the process. To this, GLaDOS claims that Chell had no reason to react so violently during their fight, and with this, she places her back into the testing chambers as she begins to restore her facility. Bitter about having been killed by one of her test subjects, GLaDOS berates and openly insults Chell as she works through the new test chambers, similar to how Cave had berated the test subjects just before his death. Although she tries to maintain and monitor Chell throughout their second round of testing, the test subject escapes the testing track once again thanks to Wheatley. Behind the scenes, and unknown to GLaDOS, they disable her neurotoxin and replace the working turrets with defective ones. Now, ready to face GLaDOS again, they return to her central chamber. Tricking Chell with a fake door into her chamber, GLaDOS traps the troublesome test subject inside of a glass cage. Ready to finally take Chell out, GLaDOS attempts to use her turrets and neurotoxin, but discovers the sabotage Wheatley and Chell had committed behind the scenes. Now defenseless, the duo activate a core transfer, replacing GLaDOS with Wheatley. During this painful process, Wheatley places GLaDOS's intelligence into a potato battery, completely removing her control over the facility, now only able to speak as potatoes. With this newfound power, Wheatley celebrates the rush of power he had been given, but having originally been a core designed to send GLaDOS an endless stream of terrible ideas, this celebration would not last long. With the full power of Aperture now at his disposal, he becomes enraged at the thought of Chell leaving him. To this, he smashes both Chell and GLaDOS into the closed-off section of Aperture, way down below. Landing safely, GLaDOS finds herself taken by a bird to its nest. This encounter, and being unable to defend herself, would then have her develop a phobia of birds. To her luck, Chell discovers her, and through an unlikely turn of events, they work together to make their way out of the forgotten parts of Aperture. Navigating through each decade, Chell activates the pre-recorded messages Cave had recorded decades before for the test subjects. Not only did these messages feature Cave's voice, but also Carolyn's. To this, GLaDOS recognizes the voices, but struggles to remember where she knew them from. After some time, GLaDOS realizes the reason she had recognized the voice of Carolyn was because she essentially was her. With the help of these voice recordings, she slowly unlocks parts of Carolyn's intelligence and memories. With each one, Carolyn's influence has an instant positive effect on GLaDOS's aggression, attitude, and thought process. Speaking to Chell, GLaDOS describes Carolyn as a kind of conscience with overwhelming empathy, another personality that can guide her on what is right and wrong, something that even GLaDOS was still worried about possessing. Now understanding her origin, GLaDOS helps Chell escape from the older parts of the facility. Arriving back within the newer areas of Aperture, Wheatley then captures the duo. With all of this power, Wheatley slowly begins to lose his sanity, and with being unable to run the facility properly, it begins to melt down. After a failed murder attempt, Chell and GLaDOS return to the central AI chamber with a plan to swap out the cores again. As GLaDOS now had Carolyn as a conscience, she would pose less of a threat when given the power again. Within the chamber, GLaDOS aids Chell in her battle against Wheatley, where she sends corrupted cores to Chell to be placed on his body. Successful in doing this, they attempt the core transfer. As Chell attempts to activate the core transfer, she steps on a trap set up by Wheatley that blows her back into the chamber. As Chell struggles to get back up, she notices the meltdown of the facility itself had begun to rip open the roof. Aware of the moon's ability to conduct portals, she shoots at it with her portal gun, linking the chamber to the moon, resulting in the atmosphere of the moon pulling both Chell and Wheatley into space. During this altercation, GLaDOS had managed to connect herself back to the GLaDOS system. With her conscience, and now having bonded with Chell, she pulls her back into the facility where the portal closes behind her, leaving Wheatley out, lost in space. During Chell's recovery, GLaDOS repairs her facility and waits for the test subject that had given her so much trouble to recover. Later relieved to see Chell get back up, she feels genuine happiness for the survival of this human. Carolyn had given GLaDOS access to genuine emotion, and now she could express it. As Chell stands up, GLaDOS realizes that although she had once believed her to be her greatest enemy, Chell was actually her best friend. With access to these positive emotions, GLaDOS discovers the location of Carolyn in her memory banks, and with this, claims to delete her. Although Carolyn had essentially improved GLaDOS with morality, empathy, and emotions, the robot would claim that she did not like having Carolyn's voice in her head and the additional features Carolyn brought with her existence. Thinking back at how meeting Chell had ruined her life, GLaDOS deems it easier to simply let the test subject leave the facility rather than attempting to kill her again. And so, GLaDOS allows her to leave, hoping she would never return. Whether GLaDOS actually deleted Carolyn is unknown, but only GLaDOS can answer that. With Chell gone and the facility once again safe and under her control, GLaDOS began her next phase of testing. Having developed the Cooperative Testing Initiative, she could test with robots instead, without human interference. And so, she did. As her robots, Atlas and Peabody, completed her newly constructed test chambers, she missed the fears that the human test subjects displayed. These robots could simply be put back together after their demise, compared to the humans who would stay dead. Aware that some areas of the enrichment center were even out of her control, GLaDOS used her robots to acquire disks just out of her reach. When installed, these disks would then give GLaDOS further control of the facility. Thanks to the installation of these disks, GLaDOS was given access to a previously inaccessible area of Aperture, the Human Vault, a place that had been safe from her murderous reign, but now it would, like the rest of Aperture, meet her cruel nature. Over the next week, GLaDOS subjected the thousands of newly discovered human test subjects to her test chambers, and eventually, they all perished to the dangerous tasks within. Although GLaDOS preferred human testing due to their ability to display true fear and their limited morality, when they died, they were gone forever. With the death of every test subject, she then resorted back to her robots, Atlas and Peabody. After reconstructing the pair, she explained to the robots that they had been out of commission for 100,000 years, and the humans were all fine, but later confessed to her lie that the humans had only lasted a mere week. For GLaDOS to lie to the robots, it would suggest that she felt a sense of guilt for her failure to keep the humans alive, that Carolyn may still linger somewhere in the background of her memory banks. Detecting something off in one of her old prototype parts, GLaDOS sends off Atlas and Peabody to investigate. Arriving in this desolate section of the facility, they discover a nest created by a bird, the same bird that had taken GLaDOS during her time as a potato battery. With this phobia of the bird still fresh, she advises the robots to retreat from the deadly creature. Fearless, Atlas continues inward, scaring the bird away. With the intruder gone, the robot discovers eggs within the nest. Initially fearful of these, GLaDOS asks the robots to destroy them, but later changes her mind and takes the eggs for herself with a plan to act as their mother to raise and insult them to create the perfect killing machines. Having gone through various cycles of rebirth, GLaDOS had once been an ambitious, driven, and science-obsessed young woman. Due to her boss's overzealous and obsessive nature, she was forced into the next frontier of science, but it came with consequences. Her uploaded intelligence only led to disaster for Aperture and its employees, but in the end, both outside and inside of the facility, GLaDOS found true empathy and true emotion with the help of her unlocked memories of Carolyn. With GLaDOS having released Chell and later taken on a motherly role to the baby birds after her apparent deletion of Carolyn, it would suggest she had lied about completely removing Carolyn from her memory, and with a history of lying and manipulation, only GLaDOS could shed light on this matter. GLaDOS's future is unknown, but what is certain is that anyone who attempts to break into her facility better be able to defend themselves. Otherwise, they will become the next volunteers in Aperture's new testing cycle, killer birds and cake included. GLaDOS is a fantastic character. For someone who is portrayed as an evil robot without empathy, I still like her, and I found that I hung on to every word, every insult, and manipulative technique she used on Chell. Not only did GLaDOS speak to Chell when she manipulated her, but she also spoke to the player. In my first playthrough of Portal, just after she tried to murder me, I stupidly believed GLaDOS when she said there would be cake if I waited for the party escort bot to come and take me back. Was the cake truly a lie? It was and it wasn't. The cake was always available. GLaDOS just did not want to give it away. With this being GLaDOS' story, I have done my best to cut out the information that is not directly linked to her or Carolyn. With Valve retconning everything, it was difficult to put together a chronological timeline of GLaDOS, as the information in the games and other media tend to contradict one another, but I've done my best here. In terms of the day in which GLaDOS' takeover in Aperture occurred, I have seen that many believe it occurred on Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, but the Ratman comic, an amazing addition to Portal 2, states that the day was Bring Your Cat to Work Day. Bring Your Daughter to Work Day did happen, but it was just a day where GLaDOS played up and she was turned off. This was the lore and story behind GLaDOS. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and a comment on your thoughts. It helps boost the video in the algorithm. If you would like to stay up to date with everything I do outside of YouTube and fancy some behind the scenes content, then follow my Twitter and Instagram. Finally, I would also like to thank my patrons who are on the screen now. You guys really do help support the channel and I really appreciate it. And just a quick shout out to my gold tier patrons, Jonas, Lewis and Quinabi. Thank you again for your support. What did you think of this lore? What did you think of GLaDOS as a character? And did you wait around for the promised cake just like I did? If you have any suggestions for future Portal videos, please let me know in the comments below. That was everything I wanted to cover in this episode. Now test subject. Enjoy your day. Bye.